Welcome back, everyone, to The Creative Moment, Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Dante Bullhauer.
Jamie Bullhauer.
He's a writer. I'm a photographer. We are both very much involved in the media world, and that's what this podcast is all about. So, let's go ahead and... There we go. After I kept messing it up. But today we are talking about the customer, or more generally, I guess, just the consumer, the viewer, the reader,
Yeah, because I don't have a lot of customers.
Well, I just wanted to say it.
Yeah.
Customer is king. There, I wanted to say that. But yeah, we're talking about kind of flipping the perspective instead of kind of our perspective of being the creators of whatever media, kind of talking about your perspective as the consumer, the viewer, the reader, those types of things.
And when that influence comes into play, when do we start thinking about them and
during the whole creation of whatever.
So quickly, there's three dots that kind of happened this week that kind of brought this together. One, we are studying or just read William Wordsworth, "The World Is Too Much With Us," later soon, and how that poem could actually have been written today, like that message. Even though the poem itself is just him talking about his frustration with modern life in the 1800s, it actually it still holds true today. Second one was I was in a Twitter space and I shared a somewhat pretty autobiographical type of poem. The form was unique to that poem itself. And Twitter Spaces has its own hurdles, meaning all they hear is you reciting it. They don't see it. And it was about a really serious time, a big moment in my life. And after I read it, they were like, "Oh, that's such a sweet poem. Is that how you met your wife?" That poem was not... It dealt with a big moment and decision making in my life to change some things around, and that was nowhere close. So I was like, okay. And then I was in another Twitter space. Again, people were reading poetry. This one was a little bit more relaxed. They had conversation afterwards, just kind of this really chill vibe. And one of the artists came on and they were like, I really like this space. Because I don't care what anybody says about my work. I can come here and read it, and I was like, okay, no, sorry. And in poetry especially, you do get that, and I'm going to have the unpopular opinion. You did care because you shared it and you wanted to know what we thought about it, even though people will say, no, I only write for myself. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. There is a time and a place for that, and like writing for yourself and journaling and stuff, but to become art, and now here again, maybe an unpopular opinion, to actually then become art, the consumer, the reader, the viewer, whatever, has to be a part of the equation. Then it's art. Anything else that's just held in a box or never displayed per se is self-expression. Okay, it has artistic elements. I get that, but I think as a part of that equation, then the consumer has to be in play. And so that got me thinking, and especially in your world, because you just came off of a really cool trip. You took some photos, and I was like, okay, what were these? Were these meant to be art, to be consumed and stuff like that? Was it personal? When, in your world, does that in photography come into play? Yeah. So first off, let's deal with the really hard aspect of yours. Your personal stuff, like the things that you, the pictures and stuff you took over or have done before on your personal vacation things, those times that you go out to be in nature and stuff, but yet you still take pictures. You still go for those shots. Where and how does the consumer, as we'll say, viewer, come into play in that process? Yeah,
so there are kind of two flip sides to, I've kind of two different consumers at times. When it's just my personal stuff, unpaid stuff, like I just got back from a trip to Utah. Just went hiking, did all this cool stuff, took photos, went into a couple slot canyons, those types of things. That is a different consumer than being paid to make a hype video. And so
we'll talk about the hype videos and stuff later. Like, let's deal with the more not that they're both not creative, but I think this personal aspect, because you probably maybe weren't actually thinking how they'll be viewed. I don't know.
When I go on these trips, there's kind of two, I guess, aspects of like what I create. So I went and hiked a 7-mile hike the second day that I was down there, and I knew the photos that I wanted to get there because I saw it on the trail app that I use, and I knew that I wanted those photos. And so the first part of it, and I guess the main part when I'm making personal work, is I do it because it fulfills me, and I just love having those shots. I was thinking about this it was a 14-hour drive, so I had a lot of time to think. But I was thinking I'm literally driving 14 hours to just take a couple digital like images. And on one side, that's really cool that like my passion will drive me to do that. But also I was like, that is a weird, like, I'm just going to snap a couple photos and spend all this money on gas, all this stuff. So, but it fulfills me, and I love taking those photos. But this kind of reminds me of something that I heard at the NEDA conference in April, where their keynote speaker was talking about content creation without actually posting it or sharing it is actually selfish, and you not sharing that gift, it doesn't do anything. There's no point in taking those photos, doing those, writing those. There's no point in it. Which is kind
of the art equation that I was kind of talking about. Like it becomes something once it's pushed towards somebody.
Yes, and so while I take those photos for the main part of fulfilling me, I am thinking about posting them on Instagram, thinking about how to put, a series of photos together for Twitter. I'm thinking, because I want those photos to be appreciated as much as like I was fulfilled taking them. I want other people to like the photo, to comment on it, to just share that gift. It's not the main part, and it's a much more smaller part than like if that photo or something doesn't do as well, it doesn't affect me near as much as client work, because obviously I'm creating it for them, they're paying me, that type of stuff. But I do think about the consumer taking the photos and things, but the main part of it, the main point I went to Utah was not to post on Instagram or to post on Twitter. It was to get those photos, and I'm probably going to print some, frame some up, do some cool things like that. So there are two sides to it. I do think about the consumer.
So I'm just because I want, like, when in that process, because you already said that you had saw through the app that you actually wanted to recreate, or at least be in physically kind of the same area to take, I guess, maybe the same kind of shots. So you, on that part, I understand you want to go do that, because again, art also records our existence, our moment. But so in that process of taking them, because your photos were awesome, they were not like bad photos. Like
it was hard to take a bad photo there. I mean, when you're up there, it was pretty hard.
True, but if I did it, there would be some dad photos,
Yeah.
So when in that aspect of your creation, did you, or was it unconscious that you were thinking about it?
It was probably more subconscious than I realized. When I was up there taking those photos, I was also vlogging, so that's kind of thinking about the consumer the whole time, because I'm trying to tell that story. But specifically the photos, I when I was up there, I was just such in awe of the view. I wasn't really thinking about the consumer really at all. I was more just thinking about, I want to get these photos because this is what I do. Like it fulfills me, and that during that time, I guess it wasn't until maybe I got back and edited them that I really thought about, okay, should I crop this vertical for Instagram? Should I post these sets of photos? So I guess it really didn't occur to me until
the edit.
After the actual experience.
And sometimes, like you said, like one of your Colorado buffalo, remember we did that as a present, for grandma and grandpa. And they really, and it became later. So I'm going to jump in a little bit because I like how you mentioned, or that part of editing, because obviously as a writer, okay, I can journal and I can do some personal writing, but I too, and I think a lot of writers, and like Stephen King, he addresses the reader in all his books a little bit, at different times. And so he's cognitive of it too. But I do think, and even if you remember in class, that you write, and Langston Hughes talks about this in his autobiography and stuff, but you write for you first, okay? So when I'm like taking a walk and I get an inspiration for a poem and I just jot it down, but then the second part, the edit, the work, and sometimes some poems don't need a lot of work, probably just like you with your photos, like some of them are just
when
like...
you have the idea nailed down already,
that
it's close to a finished product, right off the camera.
And you got some technical aspects that you do. But for the writing part, then I do start to think, and then the edit or the second draft or even the third, depending how many edits are involved, is about the reader, the person who consumes it. And I go through this process like, okay, I've got this metaphor going on in my head. I have a very recent poem called "The Last Leaf," but it's as if the last leaf is a person. And so I've got to do the work so that I want that feel of like, okay, whoa, this feels like a person, yet there's something going on. And there was these hints that then when I hit them, that I'm the last leaf falling from the tree in the middle of a snowstorm, that they connected, though, to the human-like experience that I'm talking about a little bit, because I talk about losing friends and, things like that. And I have to think about, okay, how do I continue and match like word usage for a leaf or a plant that still correlates with a human experience? Because like I use the word, life was so green leaf, and it takes a lot of work and things like that. But as I edit, I try to stay true to the theme and the idea that I had for myself, but want to make sure, and just like my one dot that I had this poem, I thought it was kind of clear that this was about making that decision. And they were like, oh, that's so sweet. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess I kind of failed there. And again, though, it's just audio. They can't read. And so the consumer, the reader, and even for my blogging and stuff like that, I write down the ideas first for myself. I get that onto paper. But then I do and work and edit so that the experience of the art is received from the reader, that they get it.
Yeah.
And it was an earlier review, a couple of years ago for one of my early books. And the reviewer, though, I just loved, they're like, I don't understand poetry very well, but these poems I get. I liked reading these. And like, yes, I want them to enjoy poetry. I want them to understand the depth, but to also have an experience that, especially in that case, that person, like, I don't understand poetry. It's like, oh, that's cool. I don't, that review is one of my favorites in that regard, because it showed that the time I took editing for that made that equation work. It became art because they enjoyed it. Now, other people may not have enjoyed it, but still, that I think is important, the perspective there. So your paid part of your job, and there you got a lot of different, because you got like senior photos, you got sports, which in sports you don't know what actually is going to happen. And you've got different jobs even with that. Like if you get hired to do a special shoot, you're doing the hype videos. And you still don't know what's going to happen. Where then, and how does that role of somebody's paying you?
Yeah, so I always kind of get a little nervous before every shoot. I'm like, people are paying me X amount of dollars to execute. Like, you got to deliver, because like they get this cool dunk, they get this cool, like, so I'll throw this up on screen. I just got season opener at Adams Central basketball game. One of the players hit a half court shot at the buzzer, and I nailed it. And I'm like, I don't even film that, because it's like, you're not gonna make it, whatever. I saw her like rushing to get the ball. I'm like, well, you better get it in case, she makes it or whatever, and she did. And so I was like, the whole process of paid gigs is very much different from like when I just went to Utah, because the entirety of it is thinking about the consumer or the client or whatever. And there's, again, even with like hype videos, there's a couple different consumers. There's the people that paid me that want these certain things, and then there's the people that are going to watch it that it also needs to deliver the feeling that I was paid to deliver. And so I usually storyboard a lot of my video work, photo work. If I'm hired out to shoot photos of someone's kid, there might be cool shots that I can get. So we've kind of touched on this other points. Might be cool photos that I can get of other people, or like maybe they're not the best player, whatever. But my goal is to get photos that the client wants. And sometimes that's not always the most creative photo, especially like with senior photos. There might be cool shots that you can get, but at the end of the day, if it's like a senior sport, they want to see their kid's face, they want to see them, with the ball or whatever they're doing. And that's stuff that I, have to think about on the fly of, okay, I could shoot, it would be easier to shoot it from back here, but you're not even going to see their face, so I have to move kind of over here and kind of maneuver through people, shoot through these other different things so that her face is in it or his face is in it, so that you can, because I wouldn't want a photo of me where, you can't even see my face, or maybe like,
or not a ton of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want, so like volleyball is probably the best example, and it'd be way easier to shoot on the baseline, but no one's facing you. So it's those photos, maybe one or two of someone spiking it, cool, but then I have to go basically like right at the net and shoot like this way, and there's always people walking around. They're like, I'm literally sitting right in front of the bleachers. So that whole process of paid gigs, the client is basically the consumer is the forefront of everything. The shooting, the storyboarding, the editing. I'm thinking, what would the consumer like to see or feel or whatever? And that's sometimes stressful, because sometimes I don't always know. I don't always have the clearest idea of what the client wants.
Yeah.
Whereas
how they'll interpret it.
Yes.
Like in that sense, because even though photography might seem, that's there is stories involved. There is emotion. I'm just flashing back to Aurora and the state championship. Those photos. Oh my God, what's his name? He's down.
Carson. Yep.
He's on. He's just in that whole shot. There's like that's a part of the art aspect. So you tweaked at it a little, or mentioned it a little bit about the creativity and trying to bridge your creativity with, especially with a client you don't, maybe a first-time client, like you've never got feedback from them yet. What's that tension?
So it's really a balance of what I think might be creative, but if I have several opportunities to get a shot, maybe I'll just take the risk of doing the creative shot versus maybe not the technically correct shot. But like for sports, if I, want to go film over here, it's kind of stressful, because I'm like, if this doesn't turn out how I want, it's probably going to be unusable, and therefore I just missed out on maybe something really cool happened and I didn't even get it because I was trying to do something creative and new. And so with first-time clients, whenever I deliver the gallery or deliver the video, I'm always like, pins and needles thinking what they're gonna say, and I just hope that, and my clients are great. They have, just an abundance of trust in me. I get to have a lot of creativity and kind of toy with things that maybe I haven't done before, but it is stressful to think, okay, well, what if they wanted it to look more like this? Or what if they saw this work and they wanted me to do it more like this and I didn't? I did a whole different approach. And so it really, the whole time I'm creating stuff for clients is just, okay, what would they like? What would serve them the best? Trying to figure out kind of what's in their brain of what they want.
Oh, yeah.
Versus trusting my creativity that I will be able to whip something up and create something that is good.
Because, I know enough of throughout the years sometimes where you're like, you thought you presented something, they're like, oh, not that they wanted something more basic, but, they, in their head, they already had the idea, even though they told you had the freedom to do what you wanted. And
and it's weird because, so with one of my commitment graphics that I made recently, I tried something completely new. He loved it. It was like all good, whatever. But then there has been times where I choose maybe these photos to cut out that I think make this player look the best, and they come back and they're like, "Why'd you use that photo? I'm swinging. It's a bad swing. This, that, the other thing. Why did you do that?" And I'm like, you don't understand the whole process of me trying to piece this together. I'm not trying to make it look bad.
Yeah.
And so, there is.
Well, and sometimes they know the story behind the swing on the
maybe
final graphic.
On it, yeah.
Nobody knows that. You're trying, and so their emotion is involved because they know that moment, and they're, and that's that part, bridging what's in their head.
And especially when they don't know the technical stuff and the creative side and that whole process. It's hard for them to articulate kind of what they want because they can't really explain it that well because they don't know why I did this transition was to make it seem kind of seamless, and maybe it looks weird or it's not what they had in mind, but they don't always. It's hard. If you don't know a lot about a certain area, chances are you're not going to be able to explain it very well to someone that does. And so, there's tension. It's definitely a lot different experience shooting for a client versus shooting just to shoot. But I love both of them. I love the part of it's more fulfilling to me when I deliver to the paid client than it is, I guess, creating it, just because I like to know that I did a good job and executed on that well. Whereas just shooting for myself, it's almost more fulfilling just to be there and do the experience of taking the photos or the videos. Yeah,
and then if for your Utah ones and stuff like your vlog that you did, and in the end. Hard question, because even in my world and stuff, do you produce better work because the consumer is in mind, or when you're free just to be creative and that it ends up going out into the world?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna drop some hard truth there. And maybe this is a little biased. I feel like my favorite work, I guess, my best work most of the time is when I'm just out there doing my thing, don't have anybody to correct me or guidelines to fill, get the faces, do this, whatever. So I feel like doing those is always so much more fun. My Chances Are YouTube video, I feel like that was one of my best videos because I could just do whatever I wanted and I could put that passion where I wanted it to go instead of, okay, well, I got to make this just a minute long. There's got to be this, and that. There's got to be a shot of the seniors.
So even with that video, though, to a degree, the consumer is still actually a part of that equation now, at the end. But you don't have to hold totally to their expectations. You are fulfilling your spirit and trying to do it so that you connect with the viewer the way you want it to.
Yeah. And I put those types of stuff is more at liberty for more extreme feedback, I guess. Like, some people just maybe don't like the style, whereas like a hype video, kind of the whole point of it is get hype. Like, if I know that I can execute a hype video and bring that emotion out, but those videos and photos that I take just kind of for me are a lot more subject to a wider range of emotion, because it's not really, I'm not trying to hit a specific audience. It's just open to everyone. And so everyone can interpret it. Sometimes, like, if you didn't want to be inspired, you probably didn't like that video. I mean, probably didn't do much, but yeah.
So as these conversations are pretty organic. I mean, we talked about a little bit the main umbrella. All right, so as you were talking about that, I thought way back, it must have been your junior year for the volleyball hype videos, and you did the added art stuff, the fire, and then drawing. And your hype videos now are not so on the edge of pushing a boundary. What do you think? Is that because now you're getting paid, you're getting a whole level of expectation? I mean, you got an ad, or the Farm Bureau is the one who kind of invests in these hype videos.
The Farmers Mutual.
Farmers Mutual, sorry. And so they're like, hey, we're going to put our stamp on this. So have you thought about, like...
There is part of just being a kind of brand, that kind of sounds weird to say, that there is a little bit of dial it back, because again, when you put more kind of creativity in it, it's more open to interpretation. And I would rather know that they will at least like really like it than some people loved it, some people hated it type thing. So like, for example, one of them I remember, there was like, I drew wings and fire or whatever, it was Gretna Dragons. And some people could have thought that was really dorky and lame and it looked like a child was just coloring or whatever. And some people could have thought, wow, that's really cool. I've never seen something like that before. And
well, no, they hadn't. Oh my gosh, that was like the feedback that we got was very, very positive.
Yeah, and so there is, kind of that balance, and part of it's also turnaround time. I've tried to streamline that stuff, but
you stayed up all night.
Yes, I have. But I would rather know that I'll hit the generic audience well than maybe stretch my creativity and have it kind of be a split decision.
Which then, though, is the point of our conversation, is the role that, the consumer, the viewer, the reader, whatever, has in our creative process. Yeah. And you're not guaranteed ever to have, people like your stuff.
Every time you put something out there, it's a gamble.
It is. And, sorry for any of those who get annoyed with the Stephen King, but I use him a lot because he's very successful. And even in class, I'm like, he makes millions of dollars, People don't like him. Like, they do not like him and his writing and stuff. And it's, so you're never guaranteed. You can be successful. And, we talked about that before with that. So, the consumer has a role.
And whether
if you're making art.
Or the whole point, not the whole point, but one of the main parts of content creation is the sharing of it. I mean, what good are my photos if I was the only one that ever saw them? What good are your poems and books if they never get out there for the world? And I think that if you do have this gift,
or whatever your gift is,
it should be shared. And we've also kind of touched on this, but that's really doing a disservice not only to yourself but to others when that content or whatever your gift is just kind of held back and never seen by consumers, by the others, by the general public. So that was Creative Moment Season 2, Episode 7. Hope you guys liked how we, kind of brought some insight. We dropped some truth on this episode. So, we will see you guys in a couple weeks.